We are rolling.
We are rolling.
So, what's your name?
Hi, my name is AJ Hill.
Okay, where are we? To give it a bit of context.
We are on the 7th floor of the new Adelphi building in Salford University campus.
And what are you doing here today?
I am with my friend and colleague Tom Short, and we are discussing ways of making money by doing street performance.
Okay, fantastic. And how would you describe yourself as a performer?
How would I describe myself as a performer? I am a prop comedian, clown-esque stand-up performer. So that's generally what I do. I'm a stand-up performing, prop comedian, clowning kind of guy.
Okay, and what draws you towards stand-up to funnel those into, rather than going straight down the clown route or down the proper artist avenue?
Well, I mean, I've always been interested in stand-up comedy, so I've always found stand-up comedy good and interesting, and I've loved it ever since I was a little child. I remember Bobby Davro, Freddie Starr when he threw those maggots at people. I saw that on television. That's how old I am. I saw the original clip. So yeah, I just always loved it. When I was in my teens, I got into listening to Bill Hicks's albums, stuff like that, and I actually always wanted to be like a Bill Hicks-alike. I was like, I'm going to be the next guy to tell the truth to power, yeah! And that has not happened. So what I do is I use props. It's quite interesting. I basically was always the guy at parties growing up who would have a crowd of people around them, and I'd be telling them stories and anecdotes about my life. But when I actually got into performing and doing jokes, I started going down the prop comedy route, and now I do more character acts, and like I do a stupid French accent, which isn't very French and not a good accent, but a lot of people pick up on that and they like it. And yeah, I don't really tell any stories about my own life that much anymore, and it's just usually just nonsense that I do. Heavy duty nonsense is what I call it.
So you said about like telling the truth to power.
Yeah.
How do you think that comic performance or comic writing can aid telling truth to power, as you put it?
Well, you've got satire, so satire is a very powerful thing, isn't it? You can lampoon those in high positions of authority quite easily through satire. So a good example back in the day would have been Spitting Image. They were really good at sort of like getting to the point, drilling down to the core like concepts of somebody's flawed character. So John Major's a good example. With John Major, they always used to portray him as a grey puppet because he had a very bland personality, and he didn't seem very authoritative, especially compared to the previous Prime Minister Margaret Thatcher, who was always seen as they sort of gave her a really beaky nose like a vulture. So they sort of I thought the way that they lambasted people was amazing.
And do you think that applying comedy writing or comedy as a lens for social satire, do you think that that helps change, or do you think that by making light of a situation it actually can undercut the point you're trying to make?
It's interesting, isn't it? It's very interesting, because as a good example, Donald Trump is probably a good example of how there's so much satirism of Donald Trump, and there's so many sort of bits out there sort of taking the piss out of him, like sending him up, that it's become a bit null and void. It's like become such a cliched thing to do, to send Donald Trump up when he does such a good job of doing it himself. And I feel that, say, Boris Johnson, who's going to be coming in as Prime Minister probably very soon, he's another character who actually, like, well, he's well aware of comedy, so he used to be on Have I Got News For You, and he used to make jokes himself on that show. So like, I feel that it's going to be quite hard to sort of, it's very easy to sort of do satire and lambast somebody who's a very serious human being, but somebody who's not a very serious human being or doesn't care is a much harder thing to do, really. So yeah, I think Boris Johnson, he's the kind of character that, like, all the bad things that happen to him. It's like water off a duck's back, and he's very savvy, although he doesn't appear to be. He appears as a clown, so he presents himself as a clown. It's quite interesting when you think about it. Boris Johnson presents himself as a clown, but actually he's not an idiot. It's a performance. He knows what he's doing, and he's very savvy. So they've recently had the bus conspiracy, which I love. So there's a recent interview with Boris Johnson where he's rambling. And he doesn't seem to be making any sense. And he's like, "What do you do in your spare time, Boris?" And he's like, I like to make buses, and I like to paint them. I like to make things." And he's not really making much sense. But actually, they think that the reason that he's done that is because it's completely changed all of Google's algorithms. So the news stories and news articles about Boris having a lie on the side of a bus have been replaced with news articles of Boris having a rambling interview where he's looks like a joke and he's not making any coherent sense, and he's just talking about building buses. So like, I think that's a way of like Boris looking like an idiot on the one hand while being quite smart and intelligent on the other. So how do you sort of like lampoon and mock somebody who effectively does that to themselves but uses it in a way that actually advances their own career?
So do you think that comic performance can be used in quite a negative capacity then?
Yeah. Oh, sorry, yeah, I think comedy can. I mean, you and I operate on the circuit. You get a lot of open mic acts, especially when they start out. You get awful people who basically, they feel that comedy is just a platform to just say whatever they want and like voice their awful opinions. And I mean, I think offensive comedy can be a wonderful thing. So we're talking about mocking truth to power, mocking the powerful. Frankie Boyle is a very offensive act, but actually when you boil down to what he's actually saying, like, he's got a lot of great ideas about, and he's very sharp on like what's going on in the world, and like he makes a lot of salient points about the state of like society and the state of our political system in the UK. Whereas on the flip side, you've got someone like Jimmy Carr, who has got into a lot of trouble recently because he's just doing like offensive jokes, which is fine on the one hand, but obviously recently he's got in trouble for making a joke about dwarves just being abortions that made it, and the comic Tanya Lee Davis, who suffers from dwarfism, she knows, she's met Jimmy Carr on several occasions, so she's like, well, you've met me, I can understand how somebody who you personally know, if they hear a colleague of theirs saying something like that, you're like, well, you know me, it's a bit offensive that you would make that kind of statement. I would myself not like to make any misogynistic comments, but on the open mic circuit especially, you get a lot of newer acts who just feel it's complete license to say whatever they want, and they voice these horrible, like, my wife kind of Columbo jokes, as I call them, just like, which punch down, and punching down is a bad thing. So truth to power is great, punching down is bad, but yeah, there's a grey area everywhere, because you're gonna have people you're like, well, I am punching up, but actually, like, sometimes it's it's even punching up, I feel you've got to toe the line somehow where you're not, I would say take the mickey out of what people are doing, not fundamentally who they are. That's probably sort of how I would see things, but I'm not very good at offensive comedy. I try and stay away from it. I try not to. I like to do cheeky comedy, so I like to sort of talk about sexual things, and like, as you know, I use some rather unusual props on stage. I have a dildo which is strapped to a car. I like to drive that around the audience just to see what their reaction is, but like, yeah, I don't want to upset or offend people. I have had the odd occasion where someone's ran out. I had one occasion in Edinburgh during my first show, which you were a part of, where one woman ran out of the room crying. I distinctly remember that because I was doing a personal joke about abortion, and because I was doing abortion jokes, I also had, because I have experienced an abortion with somebody, so I was doing it from a very personal point of view, but I can understand how maybe that's not sufficient. I also did jokes about fetal injury, because I have a congenital condition, like a sort of disability that I was born with, so again, I felt that was my license to sort of say this, but you've got to understand there are people in the audience who have probably been through all these things as well, and like just because I feel appropriate to make jokes out of it doesn't necessarily mean that they, you know, I feel that's me lambasting myself, but like for them, you know, these are very painful things that they may have experienced, and I can understand how like somebody can run out of the room. So I think that whether you're satirizing yourself or taking the piss out of yourself or taking the piss out of conditions in society and trying to joke around with it, you have to understand first and foremost that you are there to entertain people and make them feel good about life. Even if you're talking about something horrible, it's like you're meant to make them feel that it's okay. Now there are lots of good acts out there that do that. Hannah Platt's a good example of somebody who I've seen from the very beginnings of her career go from talking about the most horrendous aspects of her life, and sort of when she started out, people would recoil in horror at the things that she was saying, but she's found a wonderful way of being able to sort of get people on board with that, which is not necessarily a skill that I've had, because I skirt and play around with those issues, but I don't like jump headfirst in, whereas she's gone through the process of like learning as a comic how to just improve and get better and make sure that you're not losing people and you're keeping them on board, which is a wonderful skill to have. It's a very fine line, sort of comedy. It's very interesting the things that people get offended by. I think I always remember I used to do a joke about modern day Jesus, and it was more, to my mind, a joke about the state of the welfare system, and how if Jesus was born today he probably wouldn't get benefits, let alone be like the saviour of the world, seen as a messiah, like because of his various attributes as a person, and he would struggle to get a job. Now for me, I was talking about the state of our modern society rather than Jesus, but there was a Christian lady in the audience who came up to me and she was like, I loved your set, but I really found it offensive what you said about Jesus. And I was like, oh, it's only happened once, and I did that joke hundreds of times, but I find it curious what it is that sort of gets at people. I was going to say triggered them, but I don't really like that term.
So do you think that there's like a power dynamic at play between the comic and the audience in terms of... So yes, so do you think that there is a power dynamic at play between the comic and the audience that they're playing to?
I do. I really do. My act fails at gong shows. It doesn't work at gong shows, and I've thought about it a lot. I've probably done more gong shows than anybody else in the Northwest. I've done about 40 of them or more. I've beaten a few gongs, but I've never won those heats or competitions. And I've wondered about it a lot. I mean, part of the reason why is I used to muck around and see how far I could push the audience, because that was me learning what the power dynamic with the audience actually is, to be honest. But my act is very much that I have to, because I'm a prop comic which involves audience participation, I have to be able to command the room. And I've found that if there's 3 people in the audience who have cards which they can lift up and vote me off stage, then I have lost a certain amount of my power. And it's very interesting. You can get a round of applause from an audience and still get gonged off, and it's really frustrating. But yeah, there definitely is. And yeah, as I said, it does work both ways. So yeah, I need to command an audience, but you know, if you've got an act who does things on stage that's horrendous, the audience doesn't have to laugh. And I've seen it. I saw it at one of your shows in Edinburgh. There was that gentleman who came along to your sort of showcase show to do 5 minutes, and he was doing 5 minutes of character comedy, which was basically a really offensive comedy about rape and child molestation, and like the whole thing was just, the whole audience was just silent because they weren't buying into it, you know. And that's how an audience can vote. They don't have to laugh. I've died a death on, I mean, that was literally the worst death I've seen in comedy the whole time that I've been doing it. That guy just utter silence, and he was sweating and shaking on stage, and I mean, to his credit, he did last the full 5 minutes. So that's something that we can say for him. But ouch, yeah, when you die, it's awful.
When a performance doesn't go well,
yes,
like the one that you mentioned, if it's comedic in its intent and the audience isn't laughing, is it still a comedic work?
Yeah, it is still a comedic. I mean, so generally, with me, I find it quite funny when jokes that I have seen work elsewhere don't work. I actually find it quite funny. Generally, not always, it depends on the circumstances. If I'm trying to impress a promoter and the audience aren't getting on board, I'm like, oh, please help. This is again down to the power dynamics. Like, I am a mirth messiah and I am giving you the word. Come with me, my flock of people, please. They don't always have to do that. They're like, actually, I'm not interested in your statements, crazy man. I'm going to go elsewhere. But yeah, it is, I guess generally, I mean, we spoke to that guy afterwards. I remember we had a chat with him because we were basically, that didn't go very well, pal, did it? And he was like, no, well, it's a character act, and you know, it's not my actual views. It's like, it didn't come across like a character act. It just looked like you being nervous on stage, like, and his character act compared to who he actually was, guessing he doesn't do those things, but as in his presentation of it, didn't work. Now, there are acts like Mr. Badger, for example. Mr. Badger does that era of material, telling like awful, hideous jokes. But he's such a larger-than-life character and such a ridiculous character that it's clearly stupid and clearly nonsense, and like for that reason, audiences can buy into that. But yeah, if a performance doesn't go well, it doesn't stop it from being the last time I died a death was a year ago. Actually, it was a year ago at Kevin Dewsbury's gig in Northwich, my hometown. Come on, Northwich! Went there, and I decided for whatever reason I was going to start my show by having a fake beard on my face, but that just killed it. For whatever reason, the majority of the audience, not all of the audience, but the majority of the audience just decided they weren't on board with that from the off, and I just lost all their confidence straight away. And you know, I did my time, and I was trying to impress a promoter. I was trying to impress Ryan Gleason, the promoter of the Blackpool Comedy Station, and he was watching me from afar, he was laughing his ass off, watching me just die a death on stage in front of my hometown crowd. Like, he was like, yeah, if you do well, I'll give you a 20 spot. I was like, yeah, yeah, and it was bad. But was it comedic? Yeah, because I was telling jokes. Some of the people were chuckling a bit, but the majority of them were just silent. It teaches you a lot when you die. I mean, for one thing, like being able to vibe it out, as in just continue having the confidence with a wall of silence to just like continue and try and look professional, at least try and like be competent. Because that was the thing about that gentleman in Edinburgh. You could see him gradually during the whole 5 minutes just falling to pieces, and that just became uncomfortable for everybody. But like, even if the audience isn't laughing, if you just try and sell it as best you can, that's all you can do. Sometimes you might get them. I heard a story from Paul Foot. So Paul Foot did a show once where it was an hour-long show, and for like 50 minutes the audience didn't laugh, and then apparently just whatever happened in the last 10 minutes, everything just came together, and he managed to get the whole room back on board for the last 10 minutes of the show, which must have been amazing to watch. I wish I'd been there. I'd love to see something like that happen. So yeah, it can be a comedic performance, and people like Stuart Lee talks about in his book about how he used to purposefully try and lose audiences to win them back. So if an audience isn't laughing, it doesn't necessarily mean it isn't comedic, and sometimes working on the absence of sound is a better thing. I saw Neil Hamburger, who's an anti-comedian. Anti-comedy is based on like trying not to do jokes and trying to sometimes like be as awful and hack as possible, just to see how far you can push the audience. And I love doing that, but if it doesn't pull off, if it, you know.
So how important is laughter to comedic performance?
How important is laughter to comedic performance? Well, the industry rule of thumb is that you want about, on average, one laugh every 20 seconds or shorter. But that doesn't give time for sort of like building up stories, and like this is the problem with like things like gong shows. You've got or competitions. You've got 5 minutes to impress. 5 minutes. You know, you do want laughter in 5 minutes, but 5 minutes is a very short space of time to sort of do anything other than just short jokes. So if you know, for me, I did my first Edinburgh show. I wanted to build the room to feel like they were like a whole crew of people together, and like to get that camaraderie with like one group of people. You can't do that in a 5 minute bit. For me, I had like 40 minutes to sort of do that. That's sort of what you want. yeah, I like to, so for me, for my shows, I want to have an event. I want it to feel like more like an event, like something special's happening. Because the comedy's become rather homogenized, so like that standard of like a short jokes, joke, laugh, ha ha ha. That's how it homogenized it is these days. That's how most comedy is, and like I find it funny. I find quite a lot of it funny, but it saddens me a bit when I hear about comedy back in the 80s and 90s, like especially here in Greater Manchester, where you had like Steve Coogan and Caroline Aherne and Frank Sidebottom and all these wonderful people doing these weird and wonderful character acts. Like, you don't see that anymore. It's not really a thing. Like Peter Fleming.
And where do you think that went?
Where do I think that went? I mean, I've been doing comedy for nearly 5 years now, so I'm not, I'm not an experienced act that much per se, but I think comedy became really industry focused. So yes, I want to make money from comedy, that would be lovely, but like this idea of just chomping at the bit to start like getting money out of it straight away, a lot of newer acts seem to sort of have this concept that they just have to make it, and if they don't make it, they're somehow a failure. And it's a bit of a shame, because it means that I was having a conversation with somebody today and they said, oh, I did a comedy course because I was terrified. I was terrified of being shit. And it's like, why? Like, I know so many professional comics who say they're a bit jealous of the fact that, like, as an open mic act, you can just go up and do whatever the hell you want and you can just try stuff out. Whereas when you start earning, like, I mean, I earn some of my income from doing comedy, but like not all of it. But like, those acts that do earn all their money from doing comedy, they have to be consistently good and they can't try new bits out. So like, I often put comics up in my house, and like, when they stay, they just talk about their gigging here, there and everywhere. And one of my friends in particular, he was like, look, I haven't been to a new material night in forever because I need to earn money from doing this, so I can't take a night off to go and sort of try something new out. I have to just go and like get the paid gigs and earn money, and when I'm at that paid gig, I have to smash it for the promoter. I can't take risks and sort of potentially mess up the night. And having been a promoter, I know what it's like when you have an act and you're like, please be good, please don't, don't mess this up, because if you kill the air for that gig, you could stop an audience coming. If the audience don't come back, I'm in trouble. Like, I need that audience here for me to make money, to keep the gig going. There's so many pressures. There are like lots of pressures on the industry as a whole, but like, I feel that like you should be able to take risks. I feel that, consistent laughter is a wonderful thing. A rolling laughter is a good thing. But sometimes, if you can like hold that tension, because comedy is about tension, so if you hold that tension there for like ages and it starts to become painful, and then like you release that tension, like that can get a bigger laugh than if you've just got like sort of like, if you hold tension for like a minute or 2 minutes where there's not much laughter, or there's a bit of nervous titters, and then you just have some big explosion of like mirth from something that you've done. For me, that's far more rewarding for yourselves and the audience than if you're just doing the same format of like joke every 20 seconds, joke. Because if comedy is homogenized like that, then I suppose that's why I feel that maybe audiences like my act, because I come on and I'm completely different to anybody else who's been on that bill, unless Roger Swift's on the bill, in which case he's a prop comic as well. He's really good. But yeah, like if I come on and I'm just with like loads of jokesmiths and I'm doing my audience participatory crowd work with props and sticking beards on people and like making people hold my dildo and giving out lollipops, and I model myself as a children's entertainer for adults. That's what I want to be. I want to sort of like have some stupid wonderment, so I have a big suitcase on me and I feel like it's Felix's magic bag. I could pull whatever the hell I want out of that, and I like the idea of sort of creating like a different kind of environment and a different kind of relationship with myself and the audience. I don't want them just to laugh with me. I want them to be engaged to a point. Like, I want them to be engaged, but I still want to control that. So heckling is awful, and you have a lot of put downs, and having the act that I've had, I found that if I can't just swear at somebody and call them an awful name to get on with that, it's very interesting. So again, the first Edinburgh show that we were doing was about being a sailor and being out at sea, and it was like, and we had a load of Navy boys in one night, didn't we? One Saturday night, a load of Navy boys showed up, and this 6'4" guy was just built like a brick shithouse, was just chatting to his mate, and I was really annoyed, so I sort of like told him to shut the fuck up, you, like, be quiet, you cunt. And like, he was nearly in tears. He was really upset because like he was shocked that I'd had a go at him, and you know, the switch between my act and that was not good. So yeah, laughter's important, and creating the right kind of like atmosphere is important. And
so do you think that in what you've said, that because of the pressures that comic performers find themselves in due to like various aspects of the industry and expectations, do you think that it's taken some of the playfulness out of comic performance?
Definitely.
And that's making it kind of blander?
I don't know about blander. Oh, you know, because there's a lot of acts out there that do the standard joke, anecdote material that I love, and I could watch them for hours and hours on end. But I think what has happened very recently, so I started 5 years ago, and in the last 5 years there seems to have been a lot of new acts starting out who are very anxious about making it big. And when I started out, I just did it because I had a few bad things happen in my life, and and my life had stopped. I'd stopped having adventures, and I stopped enjoying life, and I wanted to enjoy life again. I wanted to experience life. I liked making people laugh, and I wanted to get into that. So I you know, that's why I got into comedy. And I've been enjoying that for a long time. But so many acts that are just so anxious about like making it, and like they're so anxious that they have to. As I said, the actor was like, "I'm terrified of being shit." And you're like, why? Being shit is the one luxury that you have as an open spot, that you can be shit and it doesn't matter. Like, who cares? They're not gonna, you know, yeah, a few years down the line, some promoters might ignore you, but like the ones that, you know, see you at that point, they won't ignore you. And then if you're good enough, the ones that were ignoring you will eventually go, do you know what? Yeah, you were crap back then, but you're good now, so like, come back. But like, the other thing is that if you're getting so up so early on, like, and you're not enjoying it, there's so many people that just don't seem to enjoy comedy. Like, how are you enjoying that? Like, just stressing yourself out like that. Yeah, I get sad. We all get sad when I don't get the spot that I want, like that. And you sometimes get jealous, like, why is that person who's not been going as long as me, how did they get that spot over me? We all have those like feelings, but like, chomping at the bit like so much to be like, I've got to be great, and taking it so, how are you taking it so seriously? I just want to like shake half of them and be like, come on, like, we're having fun. Like, you know, I just want to get this point out, because I know I'm rambling as much as Boris Johnson does, and I apologise, but like, for me it's like, open mic is just solely designed for you to go out from whatever level you are and just say what, you know, try and make people laugh in whatever way you feel is possible. And I know that I said before about people saying horrendous things, but they're not really making jokes, like, or they're not thinking about how they can entertain the audience. I'm always thinking about how I can entertain the audience, but I also want it to be fun for me. Like, I want to have a laugh, and I enjoy making people laugh in the most ridiculous ways. If it's like, I've recently just been doing a whole set where there's no jokes in it. I'm just like getting things out of a bag and literally just saying what is this item in a silly voice, and then saying what it is to them in a silly voice. It's not really jokes, but like, they laugh, and that is delightful for me because it's nonsense. Like, so yeah. So
this will probably be my final question.
Okay, I know I've gibbered.
No, it's fine. If an act found themselves in a position in which they found themselves under some form of pressure, and it was taking the enjoyment out of comic performance, do you think that that subconsciously seeps into their performance, and what advice would you give to someone to try and get the enjoyment back?
Interesting. Yes, I do feel that if you take stuff on stage like that, it does affect it, as I said.
And how do you think it affects it?
Well, all the times I've ever died on stage, really, the majority of times I've died on stage, whether it be at a gong show or at Kevin Dewsbury's gig in my hometown, has generally been because someone said, oh, there's progression on the end of this. If you do well, I will give you paid work, and then you're gonna get all the fames and the fortunes that you've been after. And then I'm like, oh, I could make something of this, can I? And then you go out and like, I'm thinking more about that than I am thinking about entertaining the people, and so that's taking me out of my own performance, and I'm like, oh, I want to do well. Whereas I shouldn't be thinking about, when you're getting on stage, the only thing you should be thinking about is you and making the audience laugh. You shouldn't be thinking about like, if I do well here, I can make something, I can have a life. Like, you've got a life, you're already living your life. You know, not all of us are going to make it. That's just the solid truth of it. And what is making it anyway? So I think to newer acts and anybody, like even like if you're a top act, like, you know, I met Jason Manford on Monday. If you're Jason Manford, say, and you're doing arena tours, but it's not fulfilling you, or you're not enjoying it, then take a step back and have a think about it. Go and do some slubby open mic nights. Go to like the smallest, least attended open mic night and just go out there without any jokes and have a chat with the audience, or write something completely different that you've never sort of thought about, or just, you know, go for a walk, or you know, I feel I've got friends who started to make it, and sometimes they get anxious as well, and you're like, it's just, we can get so focused on the industry, we just forget about comedy. Should be fun. It should be fun for the performers, it should be fun for the audience, you know. And I having experience being a promoter and things like that, I understand the stresses and the costs and the problems behind it, but you know, we're there to sort of make people laugh, we're there to make ourselves laugh and try and be happy. And like, you know, I know that we're an anxious bunch of people and neurotic. I'm a neurotic idiot, and I know that we all get given alcohol, so we're usually liquored up, anxious, neurotic people, which isn't a good mixture of combinations. But yeah, there's a good, drink less, don't drink too much, stay off social media, don't get involved in social media spats. I am very guilty of that, and I apologize to anybody watching this who have ever got into any of that. I don't mean it, I'm an asshole. Yeah, stay off social media, try not to take that seriously. A friend of mine said, you know, anything that happens on social media isn't real life, it's not serious, don't take it as such, you know. And we have seen people have very massive, big social media meltdowns, and it can be very damaging to your ability to get gigs and your ability to make friends on the circuit if you do that. Look after your mental health, try and get a lot of sleep, stay hydrated. Yeah, those would be, you know, just try not to take yourself seriously, try not to take it seriously. Comedy is meant to be fun, and I know it sucks when you don't get the gig you want. I know it sucks when you know, you don't get the laughs you want from your material. I know it sucks when you write a new joke and you're like, this is the best thing ever, hey guys, and they go, no, it's not. Like, I've been trying to write a gag at the moment with a clove of garlic. So it's a clove of garlic, and I'm trying to make it funny in that I want it to be an organic butt plug. That's what I want it to be, and audiences aren't getting on board with that concept, and I don't know why, because the French for garlic is aye, which to me is exactly the same noise as you make when you'd stick a clove of garlic up your asshole. So, you know, that's funny in my head, but it's not funny for the audience as I'm trying to tell them. So that's gonna have to be changed, or consigned to the, well, my next curry, which probably isn't what, probably won't butt plug curry, but yeah, you've just got to, I think one of the things as well is try and have friends outside of the circuit, because being surrounded by neurotic weirdos all the time, we're fun, comics are wonderful people on the whole, they're lovely, they're helpful, they'll try and do everything for everybody else, but like, we're also mentally ill most of the time. So like just hanging out with mentally ill people is gonna screw your perspective up. Go and hang out with some normies, who, you know, people who just want to go out and play football, or you know, go for a walk, or go to the cinema. Like it's lovely to just be like, oh, you're not like worried about like making people laugh. You're not trying to like make me laugh every 5 seconds and outdo me with a joke in just normal conversation. Like I'm like, oh my god, like, and we all do that. We're all guilty of sort of trying to one up each other in conversation to make each other laugh. And we're like, why are we doing that? Let's just relax. So yeah, relax, stay hydrated. Eat your vegetables, and yeah, look after yourselves.
I think that's a pretty good point to end on.